Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Dockett, senior writer for Psychotherapy Networker magazine. And joining me today is integrative psychiatrist Henry Emmons. Henry has penned a very compelling story for the July-August issue of the magazine about something we're calling the new psychiatry. Welcome, Henry.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So, before we explain to our listeners what the new psychiatry is, let's talk a little about the old psychiatry. You write beautifully about this when you talk about your expectations, what you thought psychiatry would be as a new practitioner, and then 3 decades ago, what it actually looked like when you entered the field. Can you talk us through this?
Sure. So the old psychiatry, which is what I still thought I was getting into, was, as many of your readers know, it was really steeped in psychotherapy and kind of depth psychology. Um, Much of the original psychiatry was more psychodynamic, perhaps, than what most people do these days. But still, there was a great deal of psychological depth and insight, and people, at least what I imagined, is that psychiatrists spent quite a bit of time with their patients, really got to know them well, kind of had deeper relationships and connections.
And what you found?
What I found, which I probably should have known because there were signs, all around. But what I found was that even then, even 3 decades ago, psychiatrists had become or were becoming psychopharmacologists. They were really becoming prescribers. And I just didn't see it or didn't want to believe it. And in fact, I trained in the Midwest where that really was happening early. But I trained for medical school, but I went to the East Coast. I went to upstate New York to do my psychiatry training because I really wanted a more balanced, kind of broad, psychologically oriented training. And so the place I went was known for developing what's called the biopsychosocial model, which is really a kind of a holistic model. And that's what I imagined. I imagined it would really be attending to the whole person. After my training, I moved back to the Midwest again. I took a job with an HMO, which was in many ways just a great place to work. But but the role of a psychiatrist was very well defined and very narrowly defined, and that is to be a prescriber and basically to do crisis management and medication evaluations and then follow people for their medications.
Now, did the HMO have that expectation of you, or did your clients also just expect to come in, not get therapy, just get their prescriptions?
Great question. It was the HMO's expectation, but I think that most of the patients had been trained by then to see their psychiatrist as just doing their meds, and then they'd see a therapist separately for their psychotherapy. And that was just very, very clear and clean within the HMO model, and it had been for many years already.
And it's safe to say that's still the expectation today.
Right. I think without knowing it, I was in sort of an early wave of that happening, and I think it's happened in most places in the country now. It's so much that it's really become the norm and the expectation, and it's not altogether a bad thing. I think it's good to have people who are really trained doing what they're trained to do. But for me, that there wasn't it wasn't complete enough. There wasn't enough substance, or as I said in my article, it just didn't feel like there was enough soul for me to really make it something I wanted to do for 30 years.
So tell us about this because you experienced real burnout. How did you finally get to the point where you thought, I'm going to change this? What was going on?
Well, my first solution was to change my location. I thought if I left the HMO, which I did after 5 years, I could go somewhere else, and I decided to join with a family practice group and become their psychiatrist. I just assumed I'd be able to do practice more the way I wanted, and I found out it was even less the case there. Partly because the demands for that psychiatric role were so great that it felt like that was all that I could do. And I was just running to keep up. And I saw so many new patients, and it seemed like each one was sicker than the last. And so the acuity was really high. The need for medication was definitely there. And it felt like I was carrying such a big load of patients on my caseload who were very, very sick, and I just felt overwhelmed. I was underwater at that point, and so my own process. It took me a few years of doing that to realize that it wasn't just me, it wasn't just the location. I wasn't going to fix this by moving somewhere else. I really had to try to do something completely different if I was going to be happy with a whole career in this psychiatric world.
And what is it that you did?
Well, I had sort of a gracious exit or transition. I applied for a fellowship, which I received, which was basically to take a sabbatical year. And so I was paid a stipend, modest, but it was enough. And then I was able to create my own self-directed learning. So I had an entire year to devote towards the kind of things I do now, which is natural therapies in psychiatry, so use of herbs and amino acids and nutraceuticals, they're called, which I find to be very effective as kind of a substitute for medication. And then I also studied, even though I've been doing this before, I wanted to learn more about how to apply mindfulness in a psychiatric practice, so I studied that. And then the third thing, which isn't so much related to psychiatry, but I knew that there were all kinds of health professionals who were burning out, kind of like I did. And I wanted to offer something to help with that, some kind of a program for renewal and to be able to find a way to sustain an entire lifetime of service to others in this healthcare world we've come to live in.
Okay, so with this rather dramatic change in direction, tell me how you feel now about psychiatric drugs for your clients.
Well, interestingly, I went through a phase where I wanted to view myself as a naturopathic psychiatrist.
Sure.
And my vision was that I would never prescribe medications again, and I would just do natural therapies. And I tried that for a while, and I realized pretty quickly that that was silly for me to just throw that out. And there is a role for medications. I really believe that there are times and illnesses in certain patients where they're really needed and helpful. My concern is still that we as a nation, as a whole healthcare system, we are over-prescribing. And I think we're doing it too lightly, too quickly, and for too long of a period of time for many people who don't necessarily need or even benefit from a medication. So it's not that I don't feel like they shouldn't be used or that I don't see anything wrong or bad about them on the surface of it. I just think that we're overdoing it. And a lot of people who could be managed with simpler, either more natural measures or even just, quicker and maybe more in-depth psychotherapy so that they're really able to learn the skills that they need to be able to deal with whatever is stressful in their lives. I think that we're just not doing enough of that. And it's not even so much the fault of the mental health system. It's not really anybody's fault. I think we have just gotten into this pattern of very quickly prescribing the antidepressants for people who might need some short-term support, but then we're not giving them all these other tools and skills that we should be.
Okay, so take me through it. Someone comes in to see you. Maybe they come because they know the work that you do, but they present with something that a lot of psychologists and therapists and psychiatrists would see. Maybe an adjustment disorder or some anxiety. Do you hesitate to give the traditional prescription and talk to them about these other possibilities first? Or how do you think through that with them?
Right. So what I try to convey to my patients is that medications are simply one tool, and they're a tool we'll use if we need to. There are people I'll see, even if it's an adjustment disorder, where their symptoms are so severe, they're incapacitated by it. I might go ahead and start a medication right away. But more often, the case is that they're not incapacitated; they're functioning, but they're struggling. And I will usually then advise them for us to start with more natural and therapies that are easier on their body, things like dietary changes. So we do a lot of nutrition counseling in our practice. If anybody's interested, they can really read more about this on our website. But we try to define the type of depression or the type of symptom pattern first, because that allows us to fine tune the dietary recommendations or the supplements, even medications. There are different medications for these different patterns of symptoms. So first I'll try and describe and categorize the pattern of problem. Now, I don't just label it as depression, but is it an anxious depression or agitated or more sluggish? And then we have a different diet for each of those. And then I will usually start people on one or two natural therapies. And I use things that combine several nutrients into one because they don't have to buy all these separate bottles and they can get a lot better effect from it. So, for example, we'll do something that supports their serotonin levels naturally first. Now, I might give that 2 or 3 weeks, because if we're using the right thing, people should start feeling better within a very short period of time. I think even quicker sometimes than medications. And then if they're just not having any shift, any sign of improvement in 2 or 3 weeks, we might start a medication at a very low dose. Keep them on the natural therapies because that often makes the medication work better. And then try to keep the use of the medication as short-term as possible. So that's kind of how I might start with someone. And then I usually refer them to our program. We have a resilience program here in my clinic where people are taught all of these skills that we think are so helpful at sustaining resilience. And those include, things with diet and movement or exercise, but also a lot of different mindfulness approaches for helping to deal with the stresses or the emotions or the consequences of their illness.
Okay, so now I'm very curious to know how the clients respond to all this. Are they willing to put in the time and the effort that this requires? It's a very different prescription.
It is, and I have to say first that a lot of people are seeking me out because they're looking for this kind of thing. So I realize that not everyone is this motivated. But I think more and more people are motivated because to do more things for themselves because they're just not getting better. So I see some people right away early in their illness, but I see a lot of people who have been struggling with these things for years and they're on medications that aren't working and they can't get off of them, and they're really quite motivated because they're getting to a point of feeling kind of desperate, and so people actually respond very well. It's almost surprisingly well when you compare to the treatment as usual. It does take some effort on their part. It does take some time. Our program is 10 weeks. They meet every week for a couple of hours. It's a little bit reminiscent of DBT, which a lot of people are familiar with, where we incorporate a lot of skills and a lot of mindfulness approaches. We do more with with some of the physical therapies like nutrition, but people really respond well to this, and they also respond very well to starting with these natural therapies, and then maybe combining just really, really modest doses of medications. The response I see is really, really high. We've got some research to back that up, but a lot of it is just seeing people who have been kind of floundering for 5 or 10 or 15 years, and they're getting better, feeling more alive again because they can reduce the dose of medications. I mean, these are the kinds of things I think we really ought to be doing on a big scale. I think that is going to happen because it's just becoming increasingly clear as more and more people are on antidepressants long term that we've got to change things up.
So let's talk about that for just a sec. Your compatriots in the traditional world of psychiatry. Are they also looking toward these kinds of possibilities for their own practice? Do you have more company than you did when you first started?
I do. I've been at this now for 15 years, probably almost 20 years, and there weren't very many people in mental health that were interested in that time. However, I have always found psychotherapists to be very open to this kind of thing right from the beginning, and really looking for other models and other alternatives. So I have never really encountered resistance among psychotherapists. I do think there used to be more resistance, probably not so much among psychiatrists, but among other physicians, other branches of medicine. But I think more and more people are really embracing these things. I know many people in mental health now, including younger psychiatrists, who are really interested in this kind of approach, really looking for other ways to practice. And then, of course, there are so many physicians of all stripes, people of all kinds of specialties who are struggling with burnout, and they are desperately looking for other ways to practice. And so, spending more time with patients, being less burdened by paperwork, less beholden to the insurance companies, and to the need to always use medications. I mean, these are the kinds of things that are affecting people in all specialties. And I think that a lot of people are finding that practicing in this more kind of natural, integrative model is really a better way to work, both for themselves and for their patients.
Okay, now, if both practitioners and clients want to find out more about you and the way you work, is there a website that they can go to?
It's called naturalmentalhealth.com. And yes, we have all kinds of information about how I practice and how I would approach some of these different um, illnesses and different patterns of illness. So on that site, we focus on depression, anxiety, and ADD or ADHD. So those are the three main categories. And then we have some other um, courses and sections of the website devoted to sleep and nutrition and how to use the natural therapies just for good overall mental health. Probably one thing worth saying, because I say this whenever I have a chance to speak nowadays, and that is, I think that the linchpin for good mental health for most of us is sleep. And if I were starting a clinic from scratch right now, or really, I think most existing clinics, we really ought to start there and focus on sleep until that's really, really good, and then see how many symptoms are still remaining. And so I think putting an emphasis on that, I just can't overstate the importance of it.
Thank you, Henry, for that good advice. Listeners, if you want to read more about Henry's approach, in addition to his website, please check out the July-August 2018 issue of the Networker magazine. His is a feature story there called The New Psychiatry. He also has 2 books, The Chemistry of Joy and The Chemistry of Calm. Thank you again, Henry, for sharing your thoughts with us today. We enjoyed having you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Lauren. It was really great to talk to you.